Okay, welcome to this little series of videos on programming for web pages. This is literally my first YouTube video and it will be in a technical area. So I ask for your patience because this is a learning process and I'm sure I'll refine these videos as time goes by. This video is the first in a series that I'm doing about programming to create web pages. I plan to teach this in stages, trying to divide up the overall topic into several more digestible subtopics. These videos can be long for some. I went back and forth about whether to go the million small videos route or a few big ones route and chose the latter for now. You can always just watch this video in pieces if you wish. Maybe in the future I'll decide the million small videos route was better, but for now I'll take this route. So anyway, let's get started with the video. First, let's start with the most basic question. What the heck makes a web page a web page, at least as you see it, as the user of that web page or the person who visits it? The answer is the programming that is behind it. And what this starts with is you opening a browser and putting in a web address. Your browser then contacts the server that hosts that web page and makes a request of it. Most basically, it requests a resource, which is essentially whatever code is required to make the website associated with this web address that the user is supposed to see. In the old days, what this usually meant was that the web server responded to the request by looking for and providing to the browser the code in an index file, which conveniently enough was usually called index.html, that provided the programming framework for the page. And this is how most of my budget rent-a-personal websites still work. Consider the following site of mine, going ahead and opening up Google Chrome. Okay, I'm going to go to https://www.datavisualization.lab.org/d3/learning. You can tell I've been here before. You get this result. But what this actually is the index file. And the way to see this is to actually type this in instead. So now I'm actually referencing the actual file. And what do you get? Well, boom, you get all this. So what is the file index.html? Well, it contains the code that tells the browser how to deliver the page I want people to see, which is this page. Now in a web browser like Chrome, you can right-click and you will see down here View Page Source. What this shows you is the code that's behind a page. So clicking on that, we see all of this code. This is the code that's in the file index.html, and it's what produces this web page that you see here. Now these days, it's gotten a little more complicated than this. Lots of websites have their web page code assembled and sent to the browser, but there isn't necessarily a single index file supplying it. This information is usually assembled by programs that run on the server side. But for our present set of videos, we aren't going to think about this more complex possibility. We're going to think about an index file and associated files that contain the code with which our browser produces the page folks actually see. The index file usually includes or references code from 3 languages: HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. In this series of videos, we're going to talk about all 3. So in this and the next video, I'm going to provide an introduction to HTML, which stands for hyper, that's the H, text, that's the T, markup, that's the M, language. So HTML is hypertext markup language. Let's break this down. A markup language is one in which the syntax is distinct from the content, like the text or images, and tells you something about how to display that content. So the markup language tells you how to display the content. Basically, a markup language is one that provides some syntax determining how the reader will see the text and other content of the final document. Someone once told me, I don't know whether it's apocryphal or not, that the term markup language is basically a nod to the old days when editors would write comments to printers on a plain Jane typed up text file about how to format that file for the final printed book magazine or whatever. What you need to know is that a markup language is one that provides code that tells some display program, like a web browser, how to set up the text and other stuff like images for the final product that the end user actually sees. The code are usually referred to as tags, and the tags tell you what to do with the content like text that is within them. The hypertext part is a little trickier and basically means that you can use the document to navigate to other documents. However, this is done through a device that should be familiar to you, a link that you can click on, like in a web page. HTML is a client-side language, and that means that when a user browses to a website, like say wikipedia.org, and opens it, they are really opening an HTML file, and all of the processing of the HTML file to produce what the user sees occurs on their browser, which might be Chrome or Edge or whatever. So it's actually happening on their browser. This can be contrasted with server-side, which is stuff that is executed in the far-off server that is actually hosting the web page. If you think of a website as like a human being, HTML provides the structure. It's kind of like the skeleton. The other major client-side elements are styling, which is done through a programming language usually referred to in practice as CSS or cascading style sheets, and dynamic or interactive elements of the page, which are often done through JavaScript. Continuing this sort of human body analogy, you can think of styling as determining looks like hair color and style, skin color, weight, whatever. And JavaScript defining what the body can do: run, skip, jump, talk, eat. All three of these are usually executed on the client side, but in reality the situation is more complicated than that. For instance, there are server-side JavaScript applications or libraries, meaning that you have JavaScript that executes on the server and not in your browser. One example of this that is really popular right now is Node.js. You also have other languages that operate on the server like PHP and play a role in creating some websites. But for these first few videos, we're going to focus on client-side programming, meaning we're going to focus on all stuff that can be done in the browser. In future, I may do some server-side stuff. For example, maybe we can, set up a web server I can show how to set it up like on a laptop. I'm usually pretty lazy about that kind of thing, but maybe in the future we can talk a little bit about how to do stuff on the server side. But for now, our focus is on the basic client-side languages, HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. And in this video, we start by introducing the skeleton, the thing that gives the web page structure, which is HTML. Now remember, I just said that a markup language tells you how content is to be displayed by providing instructions enclosed in tags. So since HTML is a markup language, let's start with the most basic tag, one that in a sense tells the browser where every other tag is coming from. It basically says, hey browser, the tags within are from this language. So first, we define that the document contains HTML with the HTML tags. Boom. You can think of this as the outermost tag in any HTML document. And by the way, you're also seeing here the basic structure of an opening and closing tag. Essentially, you have an opening tag, which is just the HTML, and the closing tag is defined by this / and then the content that you had in the opening tag. So this opens and this closes. Now, before I go further to the next tag I'm going to talk about something I almost always forget to talk about when I introduce a programming language, and that is how to write comments in a programming language. In HTML, you enclose comments, things that you don't want to be executed in here. This is a comment. You start off with this little left pointing arrow thingy, exclamation point, dash, and you end with right pointing arrow. Okay, so there are two major sections to an HTML file. In this video, we cover the head, and the head section is enclosed in head tags. So that's the opening head tag, and that is the closing head tag. This is the head. Traditionally, head material goes in here. Perhaps the most important item is the title. So let's start off by giving our web page a title. You do that by creating title tags. and enclosing a title. This is an example of a web page. That's going to be the title of our web page. At this point, let's open up our page in a browser and have a look at what we've done so far. First, we save it. Now, we are using the Sublime text editor, as you can see up here. The Sublime text editor is a kind of generalized IDE. IDE is a term you'll see a lot in programming. It means integrated development environment. At the most primitive and basic level, an IDE can just mean a text editor that lights up syntax from the language or recognizes the syntax of a language and usually gives it some kind of a color scheme. But to do that, we generally have to tell these IDEs explicitly what language we're working in with the file. So what we do here is we save as, and I'm going to call this index.html. I'm going to give it the name of the index file. And here's the important thing. Down here, I tell Sublime that it is an HTML file. I go down, I find HTML, I say it's HTML, and I save. And look what happened when I saved. All of a sudden, you saw this kind of, I don't know, it's a weird, I'm not good at colors. This is like a weird pinkish red that lit up all of the HTML code, and all the opening and closing of tags is in white. But we've highlighted HTML code. Okay? So let's basically save this. Well, we have saved it, excuse me. Now let's open it. Now to open it, let's head down here to where I've stored it, and I've stored it in this folder. I saved it to this folder just now. You see index, okay? And if I double click this, it's going to open in Chrome. If you want to use some other browser, which you're more than willing, I'm fine with that. Basically, you're going to have to choose where to open it. I've actually got a new laptop here, and I'm still getting used to the mouse, which is driving me crazy. You choose open with to choose some alternative browser. But I want to open it with Chrome. So I'm going to double click it and I open it. And what do you see here is this is kind of like a web page, okay? But what do we see up here? This is an example of a web page. That is the title that we gave the web page. And we can see the source code for this web page by once again going to View Page Source. There's the source code for the web page. Now, I'm not going to bother navigating to this web page again and opening it. I'm just going to leave it here and keep reloading it as we add stuff to it. But I think you've got the basic idea. So these tags that we've seen so far, like the title tag or the head tags, or even the HTML structures are respectively, as we've explained, opening and closing tags. Tags are central to HTML. In the case of the head tag, they define what the major section of the document is going to be. In the other cases, they define what to do with the content. For example, we just saw a title, the opening and closing title tags right here, and the closing right here. They defined what is in between as the title of the web page. Strictly speaking, the title tags are an example of what are known as HTML metadata. Broadly speaking, metadata is data that gives or provides information about other data. A few examples of tags for HTML meta information, a few other examples of HTML meta information tags would be base, link, script, style, and we've seen title. So let's go through some of these other cases. The base tag is basically about determining which web address to use as the base for links in the site. There are essentially two types of base tags. First, we have just the href base tag. Href means hypertext reference. Okay, let me go up and go ahead and close this thing. Notice this one, curiously enough, doesn't really have a closing tag. I never do a closing tag with this. I wonder what happens if you try to do a closing tag in HTML with this. No, it doesn't want to do a closing tag. It wants to close the head. Base. No, it did it. Okay. So you can have a closing tag for this. We could save this, and I just want to make sure the closing tag doesn't cause the world to collapse. Nope, looks good. So basically, I'm sorry for that little lapse there, but it just occurred to me that I actually, sometimes you get sloppy about closing tags, and I basically have been sloppy about this, oh boy, probably since Bill Clinton was president. Anyway, The base tag tells you the web address or URL, Universal Resource Locator, relative to which to create other addresses. Suppose that we had been talking about like www.cnn.com, for example. Okay? What you're basically saying is that all addresses at CNN, so for example, of sub areas of CNN, would be of the form www.cnn.something, like www.cnn.com/sports or www.cnn.com/I don't know, money. I guess that's probably what they call their economics section. The way we have this current base set up is a little bit non-ideal because this really isn't a web address. That's what you really want as your base. You don't want to use the index.html file as your base. You want a web address. A little smarter might have been to use our local host address instead. So I could have done something like base href. Let me see if I can remember it. HT. I wrote it down here somewhere. Yes, here it is. Okay, HTTP : HTTP : 127.0.0.1 and go to port 8887. So this looks crazy. I realize that, but what this is it's the base that I would be using if I use the local web server that I currently have on this computer. The local web server that I currently have is this thing down here. It's called Web Server for Chrome. I want to say that I got it from the Google App Store. It's basically a web server for really lazy men, and I'm a really lazy man. So basically, you choose a folder, and so I'd go to C. Programming, training, videos, web, HTML, head, and I could select this folder, and then I click to open this thing up, and here we have this is the local, basically the directory for my local web server, and I could open our web page through this. I don't want to get too much into what these local web servers are, and I didn't use one when I first opened this this file up. We will eventually need to talk about what local web servers when we get into cases where we're importing data into web pages, because you kind of have to, in many cases, use a local server to avoid something called a cross-scripting attack, but I am now getting way ahead of myself. Bottom line is that's an actual web address that I just showed through the local server, not, you want to use something like www.cnn.com or www.newyorktimes.com, or in this case, I'd probably use for www.datavisualizationlab.org/d3/learning. I'd probably use that as the base. Anyway, getting back to the base tag, the other type of base tag adds a target, or it specifies a target. Whoops, you know what else I forgot to do? I forgot to close this base tag. And actually, hold on a second. Do you notice this little red mark down here? This usually tells you that you've forgotten to close a tag above in Sublime, but most IDEs that cover HTML have an example or have some analog to that. Anyway, the other type of base tag adds a target. This controls a bit more where links will open. In other words, it controls where a page opens when you click on a link in the current page and to open that page that's linked to. An example might look something like this. I'm going to go back to the index.html because I don't feel like typing up that entire address for the local web server, but it might be something like this. Target equals blank, and then href equals index.html. Okay. So what this is saying basically is to open a new blank. If I click on a link in index.html, open a new blank page. The other options that you have here instead of underscore blank are self. This loads the web page in the same context as the current one. So like if I had the target set on this web page and I clicked on this, the new web page would open in this occurrence of the web browser. So this tab of the web browser, the new page would open here. You can also do parent, and what that is if you clicked on a page to get to your current page, the new page will open in that page that you click to. And I think the final one, if memory serves, is called top. And what that will do is open in whatever browser tab you opened when you first started, or when you first opened the browser and went to your first web page. Okay, so that's the base tag. I don't want to spend a whole lot more time on that. Next, we have style tags, and those are basically defined as follows: open style / close style. And what you do is you keep styling in here. I mentioned that there's 3 major languages for programming and a web page, and CSS, or cascading style sheets, or style sheets was one of them. People call it CSS. And basically what this is ways that you can style the elements of your page. So I'm not going to teach this in this video. It's going to get its own whole video, but let's try to style things. So let's give the body a background color. Background, here it is, background color. By the way, the other nice thing about IDEs is they recommend text. I think I'm going to go steel blue. How's that sound? Okay. And I am going to give an element, a type of HTML tag below the color, the text of it, the color red. You don't really need to know what this is for now. You're going to learn it in the next video. By the way, notice how it keeps recommending text for me. It's beautiful because it helps me avoid syntax errors. It's why I highly recommend that you use an IDE. And for paragraph tag, we'll make the text yellow. I don't know whether I'm going to keep this or not, but it just shows you for now what this does. And to give some sense of this, let's, let's save, and let's reload this. Let's close this and let's reload our web page here. Now you see all of a sudden the background is blue, specifically steel blue. Why is it steel blue? Because basically in the style, I told it to make the background steel blue. You don't need to understand how styles work, and I'm just giving this as an example of how you can close in it. You could put in a style, put in styles directly within style tags. The other thing that people tend to do with styles is they sometimes import them from a separate sheet. And for your convenience, I've actually created such a sheet. This is a style sheet, or a .css cascading style sheet. And this is just another formatting style. Again, you don't have to know what it is. I just put some style code in there. And those are usually imported with what is called a link. So we have link and hypertext reference, which means basically the address of the file. And in our case, it's called mystyle.css. It's in the same folder. So we can just do this without a whole long web address like HTTP something. And we end up typing in here, telling it that it's a style sheet. Oops, I made a small mistake. This had to be enclosed in quotes. Style sheet. One other thing about these videos that I know is going to be very frustrating for the viewer, and I apologize for this. I'm a terrible typist, and I guess my main statement about it that at this point is get past it, because I've tried, it's kind of like Shaquille O'Neal couldn't hit a free throw in the old days. I can't type, and I've tried to do everything about this. Anyway, while I was going on about how I can't type, I introduced another one of the meta tags, which is the link tag. So sometimes these script tags can become a vehicle for including code. And in particular, script tags are oftentimes a way of bringing in, or the typical way of bringing in, the third major vein of, or third major programming language that creates websites at the client side, and that is JavaScript. And those are enclosed in script tags. So they're defined kind of like script. And I keep forgetting, sorry, I use like 11 different IDEs, so sometimes I mess up with this one. You can put JavaScript directly in here, so I could create a function. And again, you don't need to know what this is, because I'm going to teach you JavaScript in a separate video, but this is funcx let's just do var x equals document dot, how about get element? This get element by ID is one you're going to see a million times in the future if you follow my other videos. I'll just call this element try it. But basically this is looking for some element in your web page that has the ID try it. It's not going to find it now because I haven't created it. And then you could have like x.style.color, say, and make this, I don't know, red. So what this would do is find the element, find the element, try it in your web page and turn it red. This function doesn't really return anything. I don't want to get too far into that though, because I don't want to mess you up about JavaScript. But the bottom line, or I'll give you another example, something that goes outside of a function. We could do something like var d equals new date. How about? Okay, and then var n equals d dot get day. And what this is basically going to do is get the day as per the clock that's on whatever laptop is open to this. And then we could have console.log. And the console is a part of a web browser. I might as well show it to you for the first time this time, but you do not have to get this. You're going to see the console a million times. But basically, it's the console is somewhere that you can write stuff out to examine what its value is, for example. So the way that you find the console is you hit inspect, and we go to the console here. We could do, well, I didn't run it, so it's not really going to do anything. So let me do console.log. You know what? I also have to reload this. So, okay, I just reloaded this and it gave me 0. Okay, so let me try to do it. Let me run console.log n, and it returns 0. So what does that mean? Well, this code over here is JavaScript code that basically retrieves the day of the week, where Sunday is the 0th day of the week, Monday is the first day, Tuesday is the second day, Wednesday is the third day, blah, blah, blah. And I happen to be doing this video on Sunday, March 31st, 2019. So it looks to my laptop's clock, and it says it's Sunday, March 31st, and that's the 0th day of the week. And so what it retrieves here is 0. Anyway, you don't really need to know this. Its bottom line is you can enclose JavaScript in here. Now, you can also load JavaScript basically with another approach to the script tag that looks like this, where you look for a source for the JavaScript. So here I'll go to, this is one I use all the time, and I plan to do videos about it in the future, which you can enjoy or hate as you will. But let's bring in JavaScript from the source, hs:// it's embarrassing I can't think of this off the top of my head, but it's because I almost always copy and paste it. I think it's d3.js. I rarely type this out. I almost always copy it. And then it would be d3.v5 is the current version, .min.js. And that would bring in JavaScript code. Now, if you want to see what it's bringing in, we can actually go look at this JavaScript on the code on the web. And this is going to be a chance for me to massively embarrass myself if I didn't get the address right. And there we go. What you're looking at here is the source code for the D3 JavaScript library. This looks pretty bad because it's what they call compressed JavaScript code, where they basically just slam it together so that you can't read it. I don't think that's why I think they did it for efficiency in this case, but that's why some other people do it. If you remove the min, you'll see it's a huge amount of JavaScript programming that supports the D3 library, which in my opinion is one of the most boss libraries out there for doing data visualization. And I would say I'm certainly not a black belt at it, not a white belt. I'm like a journeyman or something, you could say. Anyway, another example of a famous library that you might bring in, for example, let's bring in jQuery. This is another chance, 3.3.1 I'm going to admit that I actually wrote this one down because I literally never typed in the jQuery one. I've always copied and pasted it. You don't have to actually remember these. Obviously, if you had to actually remember them, I wouldn't be struggling so hard to type them. But what it does show you is how you can bring in outside JavaScript libraries that are available on the web. Now, finally, we've been talking meta tags here. You actually have a tag called meta that covers stuff not captured by the base, link, script, style, or title tags. So let's talk a little about these meta tags. This first one defines the character set for your web page. So it oftentimes takes a form. It might look like car set equals UTF-8, for example. And basically, that's telling it what the character set is for your web page. This is what Wikipedia has to say about UTF-8. It says, UTF-8 is a variable width character encoding capable of encoding all 1,112,064 valid code points in Unicode using 1 to 4 8-bit types, 8-bit bytes. The encoding is defined by the Unicode standard and was originally designed by Ken Thompson and Rob Pike. I'm going to be honest with you, I don't know what that means. It just basically tells it a certain way that you're encoding in the stuff that's going to be in your web page. And I guess is in the programming language here. I'm one of these people that can't tell the difference between Courier New and Times New Roman. So this kind of stuff is definitely not my wheelhouse. Anyway, but one of the meta tags could be to tell you what the character sets are. You can also have a meta tag that describes the page. This is very common. Meta, let's say name equals description. I got to put this in quotes, I believe. Name equals description. And then you have content. So you give you talk about the name of the meta tag is, and then the content of the meta tag, the content associated with that name. So in this case, it would be, this is the description of the page. This is a page that introduces the HTML head. Okay? So that sort of provides a description of it. Another key one to know is the meta tag keywords. Keywords. And that one is basically words that, for example, search engine bots will pick up on. So if people search on these words, it means basically your site is one of the things that will come up. So we could say it's going to be HTML, CSS, JavaScript, learning, fundamentals, incompetent teachers. Yes, okay. So those could be sort of tags that you would have associated with this, and obviously I have to close this. That's sort of giving web browsers that crawl around and find your page some search terms to basically associate your page with. Another one would provide the author, and so the name equals author, and content. For that, again, you give the name of the meta tag and its content, and that is Peter M. Lance. That's my name. We shan't wear it out. Okay, another example of one that is sort of like interacting with the browser. So there's some that interact with the browser, and one that I would provide as an example would be how about the meta HTTP. This is another type. Equiv. So this is another type of meta tag. And we'll call this one refresh. Again, I have to put this in quotation marks. And like I told you, I'm a terrible typist. Get past it. And its content would be, say, 30. And close the tag without setting the internet on fire. So basically what this does is it sets a refresh interval. So every 30 seconds, this page will refresh. That's what it's telling the browser. Refresh the page every 30 seconds. Another one you can look at that some people that actually is not is actually a good one to know is the viewport one. And this basically tells you like how to open the page. You're setting the viewport so that your page looks good on all devices, okay? So the name is viewport, and then the content will go with width equals device width. This is actually a good example of how you have more than one element to your content. Width, comma, initial, Jesus, I can't spell today either. Initial dash scale equals 1.0. So this, not only does this show you the viewport approach, but it also shows you how to have more than one content element to your content, more than one piece of information in your content. We have the width and the initial scale. The width part could be set in pixels, like for example 600, or set as below, which is basically means to open the width of the device's screen, but in pixels. Well, anyway, that are equal to the width of the device's screen. The scale part means don't open it zoomed in or out. So basically what this is doing is it's making it a little bit more likely that this thing is going to open and look good on many different devices. Because remember, these days we live in the era of the smartphone, so your web page might have to open in the smartphone sort of thing. So you can also basically assert the content type perhaps more generally than we did above, like when we introduced the UTF stuff. So another thing that you'll sometimes see is people have a meta tag that looks like this. Let's call it HTTP dash equiv equals content dash type, and it's just telling you what the content type is, and the content is equal to text slash HTML, and then we could do the char set in here too, like we did about the character set, and we do, equals to UTF-8. So we do this for example. We could do this more general content type thing. So notice in all of these though, you tend to have some kind of a type of meta tag. So you either give it a name or an HTTP equiv. And I'm sure there's other examples. I'm not really, I don't have a PhD in meta tags. I more wanted you to understand what they are. Oh, another good one to know actually is the robots tag. That's kind of a cool one. Name equals robots. I don't know why, but most examples in the web people talk about this, they capitalize robots, and I have no idea. In this case, that may just be the happenstance of the places I've seen that discuss this tag. Index dash follow. So the follow. So the robots tag might look like this. For index, your choices are index or no index. And this is basically about whether robots should index the contents of a page. And for follow or no follow, this is basically about whether the robots should follow the links on the page. The combo above is the default, so we didn't really need to, I think it's the default, so we basically didn't need to spell it out. One thing about this, so basically what it's telling you is robots that search the web looking for information about web pages. It's telling it in this case, it can index the page, so like Google's, search bots can put it in their search engine, and it can follow any links that are in it. And if I'd said no index, no follow, it means don't put it in your search engine and don't follow the links. One thing about this meta tag that you should be aware of, though, is it can give you the illusion of power, because there's lots of malicious robots that are out there, scanning for security vulnerabilities, or there's robots looking to harvest emails for spam or whatever, and they're not going to follow the directives of your robot meta tag. And it's kind of like the old joke that only, you know, the law-abiding follow laws. Well, I mean, it's kind of true here. You're commanding robots what to do, but malicious robots are just going to ignore this, and they're designed to ignore it. Okay, so that's sort of an intro to HTML and the head section of an HTML document. And I'm going to sort of leave it off at this point. I think we've done enough for today, and I think we've given you a feel for what the head section of an HTML document should look like. And in the next video, I'm going to talk about the body of an HTML document, which honestly, in terms of HTML, at least, a lot of the much more interesting stuff actually happens in the body. So I'm going to sign off at this point, and coming soon will be a new video that talks about the other major section of HTML pages, which are, an HTML file, which is the body section. Thank you.